So if you haven't realized by the title of this video, this is your spoiler warning, spoiler warning. This is your Far From Home spoiler warning. If you haven't seen it yet, click off now or you'll regret that you got spoiled for Spider-Man. I'm not even gonna tell you how long it took me to come up with that terrible song. But yeah, as I said in the song, that's your spoiler warning. I'll be talking about Spider-Man Far From Home. If you haven't seen it, don't watch this video. This will be more of a discussion than a full review. If you want an actual full review of Spider-Man Far From Home, you can click the link over here. But in this video, I'm just going to be talking about some of the things that were going through my head as I was watching this movie. So I got to get the big thing out of the way first. J.K. Simmons is back as J. Jonah Jameson. Oh my God. When I saw that in the mid-credit scene, like that boosted the rating for this entire movie for me. But when J.K. Simmons showed up as J. Jonah Jameson, like the smile on my face, like I was completely surprised and taken aback that they even had him come back. And granted, the internet has been pushing for J.K. Simmons to come back as J. Jonah Jameson for a while, but I didn't think they would actually do it because this is a new incarnation of Spider-Man. This is a reboot. This isn't the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. And generally speaking, when it comes to doing reboots and remakes, I'm that same person saying you shouldn't put the same actors in the roles if this is a different incarnation. But there are exceptions to that rule, and J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson was one of them. And that also includes James Earl Jones as Mufasa for Lion King. Like, it was such a strong ending that I walked away from this movie super hyped. That's not to say the rest of the movie wasn't strong, but you know the saying, if you stick the landing, then you pretty much forgive a lot of the other things in the movie. And that's basically what this movie did for me. Like, I know some people, and I kind of felt this way too, that the first half of the movie was a little slow, and I felt that way to a certain extent, but that second half and then the ending, like, it made me forgive all the other stuff that happened in the first half of the movie. But it also makes me wonder, what are they going to do with Spider-Man and Peter Parker going forward? Because now the world knows who he is. And I guess that's maybe an homage to what happened in Civil War, where Peter Parker revealed his identity to the world in that comic run. But at the same time, they even backtracked on that. And I mean, I guess it makes sense for the MCU going forward, because for the most part, none of their superheroes have secret identities. And I guess when you live in this world today where everybody has a smartphone, there are cameras everywhere, the government is spying on people jerking off on their webcams, like there is no secret identities anymore. And then also on top of that, like, Peter Parker reveals his identity to basically everybody in the superhero community, which is very unlike the Spider-Man of the comics. Like, he didn't reveal his identity to any of the superheroes really until he joined the Avengers, which didn't happen until like the 2000s run of the New Avengers with Brian Michael Bendis. But in the MCU, he's telling his identity to everybody. Like, he reminds me of Barry Allen from the Flash TV shows in that way, where it's like everybody knows the Flash is Barry Allen. So at this point, I'm like, I don't even know why he wears a mask. But now I guess this also brings Spider-Man in line with the classic stories from his comic book run, where New York City basically hates Spider-Man and they believe he's a menace, mostly thanks in part to J. Jonah Jameson. So I'm very excited and very curious to see what they do in part 3. Speaking of which, like, I really hope they did not kill Mysterio in this movie. And part of me doesn't believe that he's dead because his whole shtick is illusions, but at the same time, the MCU has been pretty known for killing their villains in their movies, especially their really good villains. Like, they killed Killmonger, they killed Thanos, they killed Yellow Jacket, they killed Ulysses Claw, they killed Ronan. Eventually, they even killed Loki. So I'm really hoping they did not do that to Gyllenhaal. Like, that would be a waste of such a good villain and a good actor, and a character that I enjoyed. Like, I really liked Mysterio. Now, granted, he wasn't the Mysterio from the comics in that he was a former special effects expert and actor turned villain, but they made him into a scientist. And I guess considering the technology and the illusions that he is known for, it kind of makes sense that he would be a scientist in today's world and taking that technology and using that to go against Spider-Man. And I also like the twist that basically everybody that Mysterio's working with were disgruntled employees from Tony Stark, which now makes this the second Spider-Man movie where Peter basically has to deal with the fallout from Tony Stark's blunders. And I guess that goes into the narrative that Stark said in Spider-Man Homecoming, where he told Peter that he wants him to be better than him. But honestly, I don't know how I feel about this narrative that they keep pushing, especially now that they doubled down in this movie, that they keep pushing that Peter Parker to be the next Iron Man. Like, I don't know if I like that, because yeah, Peter Parker is very smart, but I think it's disrespectful to the Peter Parker character because he's smart in his own right. He's not Iron Man. He's not Black Panther. He's not Reed Richards. And the thing that people do forget, because you have people like Tony Stark, T'Challa, Reed Richards, Doctor Doom in the comics, that Peter Parker himself is very intelligent. And so no, he isn't Iron Man, but that doesn't make him any less special. And so I'm hoping hoping going forward, now that he has this new suit that he made, which actually turns out to be my favorite suit, that final suit in the movie, and it also reminded me of the suit in the PlayStation 4 video game. I'm hoping that this new suit doesn't have a fully functioning AI system. I want Peter to use his smarts going forward, and I want the movies to show that he is a genius in his own right and isn't relying on an AI. Now, jumping back to the beginning of the movie, here's something I never thought I would hear a Marvel movie open with. Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. When that song started playing, I was like, am I watching the wrong movie? What is going on? No, I'm not watching the wrong movie. There's the Marvel crawl. What's happening right now? I thought that opening scene was funny. You basically see the kids in Peter Parker's high school paying homage to Iron Man, Black Widow, Vision, and also apparently the world believes Captain America is dead too, which makes sense because they wouldn't know that he became an old man and he's now Old Man Steve. Nobody but the Avengers would know that. You also find out this movie takes place 8 months after Avengers Endgame, which I'm actually glad they went that route instead of, I remember hearing a couple years ago from Amy Pascal, who's the head of Sony, she was saying that this movie was going to take place minutes after Avengers Endgame. That wouldn't make any sense considering what they did with this movie. And so you have Betty Brant and another character. I don't remember the character's name, but I know the actor was in Love, Simon, and he also was in the movie Bumblebee. But they're basically calling everyone that was snapped away and returned, they're calling that event the blip. And so basically anybody that was blipped away and is returned back, they have to go back to school in the same year that they got blipped away. And the guy from Love, Simon, hold on, let me actually Google what his character's name is. His character's name is Jason. And so Jason is now saying that it's weird because his younger brother is now his older brother. And as they're explaining the world, and then you also see when Peter goes to the airport and stuff, part of me was thinking to myself, this world seems awfully peaceful after having half of Earth's population be snapped or blipped away, and then that same half has returned 5 years later. I feel like it would be even more chaos with the people returning back as opposed to when they first disappeared in the first place, because yeah, the kids got to go back to where they started when they were blipped away 5 years ago, but what about all the adults? Like, if you were snapped away 5 years ago and you had a job, do you get your job back or what? What about if you had a house and somebody else happened to move into that house in the 5 years that you were gone, but now you're back? Do you legally still own your house? Do you get your house back? What about your bank account? Do you still have your bank account? What about the money that you had? What about if you have money in the stock market and all that stuff? Where does that go? Also, what if you're like in the middle of heart surgery and you got snapped away on the surgery table and now Iron Man brought you back? Are you brought back with a new heart, or are you like, what happened with that? Also, remember that guy that was played by Joe Russo in Avengers Endgame, and he basically talked about how his husband or boyfriend got snapped away, and so he went on his first date in a long time, and so he and that guy ended up liking each other, so they decided to go on a second date. So does he now drop the guy that he went on a date with and go back to his husband? But what about the feelings that he now has for this other person? It's complicated, and none of those questions were answered, and these are all the questions I had even after Endgame, and this movie just basically brought all those back. Another thing I was thinking, so you get to see Aunt May using Spider-Man as a prop to basically boost up the homeless shelter that she works with, and she's still completely cool with her nephew being Spider-Man. And I was also like, she's either the coolest aunt ever or she's completely irresponsible, because she's even encouraging him to be Spider-Man and saying like, hey, don't forget to bring your suit with you to London. And I'm thinking, okay, it's one thing for her to be cool that her nephew is a superhero in a pre-Thanos world, but considering that this is a post-Thanos world, like, she shouldn't be cool with it at all. Now granted, she's a normal human being, like what could she really do to stop her nephew from being Spider-Man? But there's not even a mention of her being somewhat apprehensive about it. And I was just like, yeah, like I said, either she's the greatest aunt ever or she's just an irresponsible guardian. But I also really like that Jon Favreau's Happy is still part of the MCU, even though Tony Stark is gone. And his character played a pretty major part in this movie. And when they revealed at the end that him and Aunt May were having a little fling, I didn't have a problem with it. I actually liked it and thought it was cute. But then at the same time, I'm just like, so they're really just not gonna mention Uncle Ben at all in these movies. Like, I get his initials was on the suitcase that Peter used when he went on his European trip, but I'm just like, I don't need to see them have a flashback to Uncle Ben being murdered, but at least mention him. Also, Peter Tingle? I really hope going forward they change that name and actually use Spider Sense. Also, what's going on with his Peter Tingle? Is it like the Force where he has to concentrate on it to use it? Because that's pretty much the moment that they had at the end of this movie where it reminded me of that moment in Star Wars A New Hope where Obi-Wan was whispering to Luke right before he destroyed the Death Star, where it's like, use the Force, Luke. And he like closed his eyes and had to concentrate, and that's how Spider Sense was activated. But I do gotta admit, that moment where he grabbed Mysterio's gun, that was pretty badass. Speaking of badass, like, I thought all the action scenes with Mysterio's illusions, like, those looked awesome. Now, granted, you could tell they were all CGI, but considering Mysterio's abilities, there's no way you could do that and it not be fully CGI. But regardless, I was all in. And it just reminded me of a live-action comic book, and that's exactly what these movies are. And they almost felt like a horror movie, House of Horrors-esque, and that's exactly what they should feel like. One thing I will say, though, as a comic book fan, when Mysterio was coming up with this elaborate lie that he's from another Earth, and they said that the Earth that Peter is on was Earth 616, I was like, I kind of wish they actually used the designation that the MCU has within the comic book world. So let me backtrack for those of you that don't know that much about comic book lore. Basically, in Marvel Comics, every Earth has its own designation. So the main Marvel Comics universe is Earth 616. And so because you have the multiverse, MCU is actually in the comic book lore, but it's called Earth 99999. And so I kind of wish that they were like, this is Earth 199999, because that's actually the Earth in the comics. And so I felt like that was a missed opportunity to be like, this is Earth 199999, instead of saying this is Earth 616, because really Earth 616 is the comic book universe. But that's all comic book nerd jargon. And to use the words of John Schnepp, I got way too comic book sweaty for that one, and it didn't really take away my enjoyment from the movie. I was just like, that was a missed opportunity. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, all of Spider-Man's villains in these movies so far are byproducts of Tony Stark's blunders. And yeah, Tony Stark is all throughout this movie despite not actually being in this movie, which is very accurate to even the name of the glasses that he gives Peter, called Edith, which stands for Even Dead, I'm the Hero. And these glasses are basically Skynet. Like, he can hack people's phones, he can find out all information that he can about a certain person, he can even control these killer drones that come from these Stark satellites. And I was just like, why would Tony Stark trust something so powerful to a teenager? Like, why wouldn't he give those to T'Challa? Why wouldn't he give those to Bruce Banner? Why wouldn't he give them to Rhodey? Or even Pepper? Like, I get why he wouldn't give them to Fury of all people, but Parker? And honestly, I felt like at the end of the day, the glasses were pretty much unnecessary. But considering they did use the glasses as Mysterio's motivation, that scene where Peter entrusts Beck with Edith, and then you see the big reveal that Beck is actually a villain, and so then he goes through this big exposition vomit, explains to the audience that this person did this and this person did that. Like, I actually enjoyed that scene. I thought it was cool. And I know a lot of times that exposition can be boring to an audience when either you're reading it or watching it in a show or movie. It's always up to the writer and director to make it interesting. And then on top of that, Jake Gyllenhaal's performance is what made it for me. And then plus all those callbacks to all the previous MCU movies, like even the first movie with the little scientist that Obadiah Stane was yelling at. I was like, oh, they brought him back. That's cool. But part of me though was just like, okay, so if it's true that he's not from an alternate universe and he's just a disgruntled employee, you would think S.H.I.E.L.D. would have figured that out by now. Especially considering that Beck even alluded to the fact that Nick Fury is the most dangerous man on the planet and he's the most paranoid. So if anything, Fury cannot know that Beck is lying. And he was the most scared of Fury finding out. And it ultimately ended up making sense once you get to the second post-credit scene, why Nick Fury seemed to be so gullible, and also the fact that in many of the scenes they were playing Nick Fury to be a joke. And I didn't really like that, but it ended up making sense once you get to the second post-credit scene. Speaking of the second post-credit scene, like I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, that I was a little disappointed by the second post-credit scene, because when that post-credit scene first happened and you saw Nick Fury and Maria Hill turn out to be Skrulls, I was like, oh my god, Secret Invasion, Secret Invasion! And I wanted to jump out of my seat. Like, I was hyped. I was like, oh no, what does this mean for the MCU going forward? But then you saw that it turned out that Nick Fury was actually working with these Skrulls, and he was lounging on a holographic beach, and he's basically giving orders to all the other Skrulls. And so I was like, oh, so Secret Invasion is not really happening? Okay. I was disappointed. Now granted, that post-credit scene still might end up being very important for what happens in the MCU going forward, because what is Nick Fury doing on that ship? I guess it's a ship with all those Skrulls. And yeah, it was cool to see. Maybe he's developing swords, especially now that Disney and Fox are merged together, so maybe we'll get that in the future. But at the same time, because I thought it was Secret Invasion and it turned out not to be Secret Invasion, I was disappointed disappointed, but I still enjoyed it. But I didn't enjoy it as much in hindsight as the mid-credit scene. But despite being disappointed in that second post-credit scene, I was not disappointed in this movie. Overall, I had a blast. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to see what they do with the Spider-Man franchise going forward. And I definitely plan on seeing this movie again. Like, after I record this video and upload it, I may go see it after that. Actually, no, because I gotta watch Stranger Things and eventually get a video out for that. So stay tuned for a Stranger Things Season 3 review. So anyway, Spider-Man Far From Home. What was your favorite part of the movie? And what villain would you like to see them introduce in Spider-Man 3? Let me know down in the comment section below. And actually, now that I think about it, I think they should probably call Spider-Man 3 Spider-Man Home Again, because he had a homecoming to the MCU in the first Spider-Man. He went far from home in this European tour, and now he's back in New York, so he's home again. And in terms of a villain, I personally would like to see them bring back and introduce Scorpion. And then they could also use J. Jonah Jameson like they did in the comics and the animated TV series, as J. Jonah Jameson was the one that created Scorpion to eliminate Spider-Man. But yeah, that's ultimately most of the things I wanted to talk about. If you can hit that thumbs up and like this video to really help out the channel. And if you're new to my channel, please check out the other videos on my channel. And if you like what you see, please subscribe for more and tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel to help me continue to grow. And as always, I'll catch you guys next time.